Okay, so Lynn asked me to come up with a title. So it's Strength for Service to God, Family, and Country. Um, so that's a lot to cover, but quite a few of you don't know me very well, don't know Lisa very well. So I just wanted to give you a quick background to why I chose to talk about this. So back in 1991, when the Gulf War kicked off, I watched that from home, being in high school, and all I could think to myself was, man, I need to be over there. I need to be helping. I need to be doing something. I need to be a part of this. I want to be a part of this. And so I couldn't then, but our high school had a junior ROTC program, and so I put my whole effort and heart into being in the junior ROTC. I loved wearing the uniform. I loved being a part of that. I felt um, a huge sense of respect for the lieutenant colonel and the first sergeant, and this is Army Junior ROTC, um, that were teaching that class, and I learned a lot from both of them. Um, uh, Learning a lot from them because both Lisa and I come from divorced families. And so my dad wasn't around very much. And so I didn't have much of a male role model. So I looked to these two men as a role model. And I'm glad I did because I learned a lot from both of them. I learned a way to be gentle but forceful if I needed to be. But I also learned a way to have a certain amount of strength that is sometimes needed when you're in the military for doing certain things. Um, I did try to go into college ROTC, but my grades weren't all that good. So whenever I went to Vanderbilt and tried to apply, they were like, "Yeah, no, you can't. No, you just we can't take you, man." So 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 I didn't get to do that. But I did work at Averitt Express and worked on the docks, which is hard work, moving freight around. I worked for a lawnmower repair shop, which the owner, whenever I finally made the decision to join the Air Force, was pretty upset with me because he thought that I would stick around and kind of work with him and move that business forward. Thankfully, I didn't because when I went back after tech school, yeah, the business had shut down. So,
Because you left.
yeah, right, it's because I left, right? Yeah. So, um, but the decision to join the Air Force. So I tried college for 1 year. The first semester at David Lipscomb University was, I don't like school. I just don't. And so, but I made good grades. But I've realized that college isn't really that hard. At least what I was doing wasn't. And I thought I wanted to be a school teacher, an elementary school teacher. So that's what I was kind of working towards. Um, but because I didn't think it was that hard, I decided that I would only show up the next semester and take the tests and the exams. And then I came to realize at the end of the semester that you have to actually attend class in order to get the grades. And so I didn't get any grades for my second semester. So I was like, done with that. Because I passed the tests and I passed the exams, but I just didn't have an attendance to be able to get the grades. So that, college, I was like, yep, college is not for me. So Lisa and I had been dating since we were 15. And so I knew I wanted to marry her. I don't know if she quite knew that yet, but I knew I wanted to marry her. And so I was trying to figure out a way to provide for my family. And so I started asking around at work, guys that had served in the Army and the Navy and the Coast Guard, hey, what do you suggest? What do you think? I want to join the military, but what do you think? And so most of them told me, hey, don't do the Army, don't do the Marines. So I chose the Air Force. My dad did serve in the Air Force in the early 70s for a short period of time. And my great uncle served in the Air Force too. He worked on the Minuteman missiles. So I was like, yeah, let's do the Air Force. Let's do that. I know I'll get a paycheck. I know I'll get medical care. I know, things I'll be able to provide for my family. So then I decided, well, what do I want to do? And I decided I didn't want to sit behind a desk. I wanted to work with my hands. I couldn't stand to sit still. So I decided that I would be a vehicle mechanic. At first, I wanted to be an aircraft mechanic. And then I was like, nope, I don't want to do that. And maybe I'll be a aerospace ground equipment mechanic, which works on all the ground equipment that powers and runs the aircraft when on the ground. But there was no openings for that, so I was like, okay, I'll do vehicle maintenance. Don't know a lick about it, but I'll do it. They'll teach me, right? And so I went into basic um, in February of '97, right? March of '97. Thank you. March of '97. Got out of basic and thought I was going to Illinois to do my tech school, and realized that it had moved to Lackland. So then they were telling me, you're going to stay here on Lackland and do your tech school. Graduated, and they were like, oh, wait a minute, we moved the school to California. So you're going to go to a Navy base in California and you're going to do your tech school. So that was interesting, and I enjoyed that. But, in basic training, those of you that have been through basic, Sundays are amazing because they can't stop you from going to church. And so we would go to church to get away and break away. And so I would go to church on Sundays in basic. And back then it was only 6 weeks. It's 8 weeks now. So for 6 weeks, I would go to church on Sundays, and I cried a lot whenever I was in church in basic. And, then I thought it was just a stress release. Now, as I've gotten a little bit older, I feel like that was the Lord impressing upon me just how important He is in my life, and that I need to make sure that He's at the head of what I do and how I do and when I do. What also helped too was there was this one guy in basic who was much more open in his faith than I was then. And we would go into the bathroom at night after lights out, and we would read the Bible very quietly, because in basic they can hear you if you talk when you're not supposed to be talking. If lights are out and there's noise, they'll show up out of the blue and start raising all kind of havoc. So we were very quiet. We were, in the bathrooms, in the showers, and just sitting and reading verses. And I don't remember if I shared this with you guys last year, but one of the verses that we always talked about was Psalms 46:1. And so I want to read that for you guys tonight. But it's Psalms 46:1. And it says, God is our refuge and strength, not our enemies or our fortresses. Israel's boast is in Jehovah, the only living and true God. Others vaunt their impregnable castles, placed on inaccessible rocks and secured with gates of iron, but God is a far better refuge from distress than all these. And when the time comes to carry the war into the enemy's territories, the Lord stands his people in better stead than all the valor of legions or the boasted strength of chariot and horse. Soldiers of the cross, remember this. Count yourselves safe and make yourselves strong in God. Forget not the personal possessive word, our. Make sure each one of your portion in God, that you may say, He is my refuge and strength. Never forget the fact that God is our refuge just now, in the immediate present, as truly as when David penned the word, God alone in our all in all. And so a lot of this, we would sit there and we would go over and over. I was 21 years old whenever I went to basic training. So most everybody else that was there was 18, 19 years old. And so there was a lot of stress that I felt back then for what I was doing. And I had a lot of people that depended on me, but I had never had that many people depend on me. And so when we would talk about this, and we would read these things, and we would go over these things, it really hit home to me that man, if I don't have God as my foundation and as my rock, that I would I wouldn't be able to do what I needed to do or lead the way that I needed to lead. And, you know, it, usually in basic training, you go through multiple what they call dorm chiefs because they get fired from their jobs because they can't do their job or something happens and they irritate the TI. But I was the dorm chief for our dorm the entire 6 weeks, and our dorm chief, I mean our TIs told me that they were like, man, this is just that doesn't ever happen, and they had not seen that since they had been TIs. And so I think a lot of that was because I tried every day in making decisions and doing things to make those decisions as though I was being watched and I was being held accountable for those decisions. And so that was a huge thing for what I was going through then. And then after, does anybody have any questions about that?
What are some of the duties that you had in that position?
I was responsible for everybody in our flight. And I think our flight at that time was about 40 or 46 guys. Mm-hmm. And quite a few of them, whenever I went through, were from Puerto Rico and struggled with English. And a lot of them were very young. I had one guy wake me up in the middle of the night mad at me because I had made him, we had this position, it's called dorm guard, and they'd have to stand by the front door, and they let people in and out only if they were allowed in or out. And so that's a stressful position, but I had put him on door guard many times in a row at night because he kept messing up, and I wanted him to keep doing it until he got it right. Well, he woke me up one night, and I think I still have the letter. He to keep himself awake, he wrote me a letter of how mad he was at me for making him do that over and over again. But in writing that letter, he stayed awake and he stayed attentive, and so I felt like it was a win, even though I was just like, man, I'm sorry, dude, but you keep messing up, and you gotta do this till you get it right. But responsible for anytime the TI wasn't there, then the actual active duty guys that were training us, I was responsible for all those folks and what they did, when they did, how they did, where they went. You know, if we had to go eat, it was my job to take them to go eat. It was my job to make sure everybody got up in the morning and got all their stuff squared away. It was my job to report every night that everybody was physically fit and everybody was in the dorm and ready to turn in for the night and get ready for the next day. So it was a lot of responsibility. But I mean, other than there was one time I got mad. The TIs, they played around with me, not my TI not knowing, but we were standing outside to get ready to eat, and we had what's called a chow runner. Chow runner would go in, and when it was time for us to come inside and eat, he would come out and tell me, and I would take everybody in to eat. And my job was to eat last, and then when I got done eating, everybody had to be done. If I was done, everybody had to get up and leave, no matter if they were done or not. So I would eat slow, just to let them be able to eat, but then I would start getting harassed because I wasn't eating fast enough. Anyway, so the chow runner had gone inside. He came back outside, and he said, we're on the wrong side of the building. We need to be on the other side. So I moved everybody to the other side, marched them all to the other side, standing over there for about 10 or 15 minutes. He comes back out, and he goes, man, they're telling me now you need to be on the other side. So I moved back over to the other side and standing there waiting. By the time we got done flip-flopping back and forth, our TI came out and was yelling at me because we were the last ones to eat. He couldn't leave until we left. And so he got in my face and was chewing me out. And I was so mad that a tear started coming down my cheek. And he was like, you want to hit me, don't you? You want to hit me right now? And I just looked at him and I said, absolutely. I do. And he was like, come over here, let's talk. And so that's when he realized that they had been messing with me after I explained it. So, those are games that were played, but they were it was a learning experience. If I ever got told, hey, you're on the wrong side of the building, I was like, you need to go back inside and find Sergeant Dyson and make sure Sergeant Dyson knows I'm moving to the other side of the building. And I wouldn't move until Sergeant Dyson would come back out and tell me. So I learned. But, and yes, I still remember my TI's names. But yeah, it was just a lot of responsibility. I don't remember a thing about any of the book learning in basic training. I know I had to carry a book every day, and I had to, anytime I was standing, I had to have it open and study. I don't remember a thing about it. I don't remember what was in that book. I don't remember ever taking a written test. I don't remember any of it. But all the other stuff I did remember. Anybody else have a question?
So you were a Christian at that point?
I had been baptized when I was 13.
Okay.
Yeah. So we got done with basic training. I got done with basic training and went to California and was out in California until July, getting trained to be a vehicle mechanic. And let me tell you how I had to be trained. Whenever I was a teenager, my mom's boyfriend gave me a set of brake pads because my truck needed front brake pads. And I took the driver's side tire off, put it right back on, drove it down the street, and had somebody else do it because it looked too complicated for me. So that's my extent of vehicle maintenance skills whenever I went into the Air Force. But whenever I got to California, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the Navy guys that were out there that were teaching us in our first part of our training, and then the Air Force guys finished up our training after that. But I got back to Nashville, Franklin at the end of July, and Lisa and I got married while I was home on Recruiter's Assistance Program, and that was August 2nd of 97. And then we promptly had the military load up a tractor trailer and move all of our stuff down to Herbert Field, and we got in our vehicles. And how long did it take us to get down here? About 13 hours? Yeah, about 13 hours. That was probably the longest trip we ever made from Nashville down here.
We left at midnight.
Yeah.
That was probably not smart.
Yeah. And then our stuff didn't get here for a month and a half. Yeah. Yeah. So we lived in our little duplex in Navarre for a while. But when we got here, we started visiting churches in the area from Navarre to here. Is it warm?
Yes.
I thought it was just me.
Even I'm one.
We started looking for churches in the local areas, and we came here to Destin, and this was the only church that called us and checked on us and asked us if we were coming back and actually took an interest in us. And so that was, August, September of 97. And so we made the drive from Navarre to Destin a lot because we started helping with the youth group. They had just hired a new youth minister for the first time here, and so we started working with him. He was our age, and so we fit in really well working with him and working with the youth. And so we spent a lot of time here at the building. We spent a lot of time with the teens. So it was like a perfect fit for us. While my first deployment out of Herbert Field was in 98 to Saudi Arabia, and that was 120 days. That was 120 days. And was that when they hired you? Yeah. They hired Lisa as a secretary because I was a very young A1C making hardly anything, barely able to pay what I needed to pay. And I was going to be gone for 4 months, and there was no way that I was going to be able to communicate with Lisa except for the Hearts Apart program through the Air Force, which is 15 minutes every 30 days. Yeah. Yeah. And so that was, we were newlyweds, and, that was going to be hard. So the church hired her as the secretary, bought her a computer, got internet service here at the building, and bam, she had an email address. I get over to Saudi Arabia, I get an email address, and we could email back and forth.
She was church secretary when we got here.
Yeah. And what's amazing is there are many, many binders like this that she has kept over the years of a lot of our emails back and forth and a lot of the things that we communicated about and what we talked about. But I thought that was pretty awesome that they were willing to hire her so that she could have an email address so I could communicate with her. So did my 4 months there, came back home the very next year. Y2K, end of the year, I deployed again to Saudi Arabia and did 90 days that time. And I think that one was a little bit easier. Yeah, that one was a little bit easier. But while I was over there, Operation Desert Fox kicked off, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to come home or not. So that was the first time since I had been in where I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm in the military. I'm on a base where I'm not in a war zone, but Southern Watch and Northern Watch were going on, and so they were flying Desert Fox out of Prince Sultan Air Base where I was at, and they had told us, they were like, hey, you're probably not going to be able to go home. You're probably not going to be able to get out of here because they're going to shut down all of the rotators, which were the big planes flying people to and from. But I was able to get on the last rotator that they were going to let go at that time and fly back home. And so I was able to get out and get back home. And then I didn't go anywhere. Oh, we went to California together. She went out to California with me for some advanced training. But then I didn't go anywhere else again until 2000 when I got orders to Korea. And so I left and went to Korea in 2000. And then Lisa stayed here for most of that.
A couple of months.
Couple of months.
And then I decided to move to Nashville.
Yeah. And then she went.
Where were you at in Korea? Osan or Kusan?
I was at Camp Humphreys.
Camp Humphreys.
Yeah. So I was on an Army base working with the combat comm squadron there. So I was keeping all of their equipment running. And that was the first time I really felt like I was in the military, because we were working with the Army a lot, and part of our job was to act like we were the enemy for the Army so that the Army could train. So we were aggressors. And so we would run around in black fatigues, all blacked out. We would run around the base. We would run off base and try to infiltrate the base, and we would try to infiltrate Osan. And so our job was to give training to the security forces and to the folks. And so I loved that. I mean, they gave me a machine gun and blank ammunition and said, "Hey, go try to break into this place." And I was just like, "Heck yeah, let me do that." That was awesome. And so I really enjoyed my time while I was over there. And Lisa came over and spent a couple of weeks with me over there, and so we got to drive around the peninsula quite a bit and see quite a bit of Korea together. And then when I got back in 2001, I got back after 9/11. So I was over there during 9/11, and when I had my own room, and I had bought a TV, and I had cable in my room, and so people started beating on my door trying to get in because they wanted to. We had little bitty cell phones, flip phones, excuse me, that we would call back home, and so I would call Lisa on a regular basis. But people were calling their loved ones in Korea, "Hey, what's going on over there? Is everything okay?" And so they wanted to get into my room to watch the news and see what was going on about 9/11. And so we watched that for quite a bit until they decided, hey, man, we need to draw everybody back into the base, so we need vehicle drivers. So they put me in a bus. I learned how to drive big buses while I was over there in Korea. And the roads aren't all that big in Korea when you're trying to drive a very large Bluebird bus, so I learned very quickly how to maneuver a large vehicle in a tight area. And so we were running routes, we were running the buses. Everybody was being pulled back on base, and people were living off base, and so we were running those around. But they armed us. They weren't sure what was going to happen in Korea, and so they gave us weapons and said, hey, if something goes down, you need to be able to defend yourself. So that was pretty scary then, because we just didn't know what was going on. But it was weird coming back to the States after that, because I wasn't here when all that happened. I didn't see how all the things were changing and stuff. And so I used to go four-wheeling a lot on Eglin Reservation, because you could just drive onto Eglin Reservation anytime you wanted to. You weren't supposed to, but you could. And so whenever I got back home, and I couldn't get on Eglin Reservation anymore because there were fences up, and there were, they do not enter here everywhere. Like everywhere where I used to go, I couldn't go anymore. So that was a little interesting coming back from Korea after that. But when I say that those things were, I mean, like Y2K, whenever you're in Saudi Arabia, nobody knew what was going to happen. So that was a little, not really scary, but unsettling. Being over in Korea whenever 9/11 happened, you're removed from that a little bit because you're not in the States. So that's a little scary. But I never felt, I had not felt like I was in a position in the Air Force where I was going to be threatened or injured or hurt. Does that make sense? I mean, I could get a finger cut off working on a vehicle, but nobody's going to be shooting at me. I never felt that. I never felt that. So there was a lot of there was, I wasn't searching for peace, if that makes sense. I wasn't trying to search God out for peace at that during that time. I should have been, and this is where I'm going to get a little bit personal, and I don't know if I shared this with you guys last year or not, but growing up as the oldest of three boys, and then coming into the military and being one of the oldest in the younger ranks, felt a lot of responsibility, but I also had a lot of anger, and I should have been searching for God to give me peace during that time, but I wasn't. And I don't know why I wasn't. But there was that period when all of that was going on. Married to Lisa, we had Reuben right after Korea. Um, Moved away from my family, pulled her away from her family, and so we weren't on our own because we had our church family here, and I had my work family at work. But there was a lot of anger. I was dealing with a lot of anger, and I wasn't a very pleasant person, and Lisa she can attest to that I was just not a pleasant person. So after Reuben was born in 2002, and then he was diagnosed in 2004. Yeah, he's diagnosed in 2004 with on the autism spectrum. Man, I knew I wasn't a very pleasant person, and so I started praying heavily for patience. And even after Reuben was born and he hadn't been diagnosed, I remember praying a lot for patience. Patience with a crying child, patience with a child who's colicky, patience with I'm so tired after working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day because we run out of money all the time and we have to stay at work anyway. Those kinds of things. I was praying for patience. And so Reuben was diagnosed, and then things kicked off and had been kicked off in Afghanistan and then in Iraq. And man, the biggest thing I wanted to do, I kept going back to it, watching it in 90 and 91, and I was like, I gotta go. I want to go. I'm supposed to go. And nobody would let me go. My chief was like, nope, You're not going. You're staying here. Oh, I'd be so mad. I was just mad because he wasn't letting me go. Everybody else was going. Everybody else was going and doing things, over there, and I was just mad because I couldn't understand. I was like, don't I do a good enough job? Aren't I good at what I'm doing? I mean, you guys tell me all the time you're doing a great job, but you won't let me go. Um, I understand better now why my chief would not let me go. He was not just looking at me; he was looking at Lisa and Ruben, as well as looking at me. And he did not want me going over there. And he's told me this, and he's just like, I did not want you going over there with everything that you were dealing with at home. It would not be good, and he could not, in good conscience, send me over there with everything that I was dealing with. And he wanted me to be home for Lisa and Ruben. And I will never forget that type of leadership quality that he had to be able to look past just the individual and look at what that individual would be impacting if he made a decision about that individual. I'll never forget it, ever. But eventually it got to the point where I did have to go. And so I went to Iraq the first time in '05. I felt like I had missed out on a lot, but whenever I got there, we were doing convoy security. And what time do I need to stop?
15 minutes.
Okay.
15 minutes?
We were doing convoy security, and man, we were running the roads all the time. And we weren't supposed to be doing convoy security. I was part of a 4-man team that was sent from Herbert Field to support a civil engineering team that never showed up. And so we were stuck in Iraq with nobody to own us. And so, and nobody wanted us. Everywhere we went, they were like, no, we don't need you, go home. No, we don't need you, go home. And we were like, but we're here. We don't want to go home. We're here. So that started almost 9 months. Finally, the gun truck company that we finally went and visited, they were like, we would love to have 4 extra bodies. That would be amazing. And we didn't understand at the time what that meant. None of us did, because we didn't fully understand the Air Force doing that mission for the Army. And once we learned, we were like, dang, now we know why you want 4 extra bodies, because you need 4 extra bodies, because people are getting blown up left and right. But after we got the training and after we started working with them and starting taking some of the stress off of them, because they needed more than they brought with them, it was probably one of my better deployments. So I say that selfishly. Lisa's probably sitting there going, that was not a good deployment. But selfishly, it was a good deployment for me, because I was able to finally prove to myself that I could do what I felt like the military calls you to do. And so running up and down the roads of Iraq, we spent 9 months over there, and we brought everybody home. And it wasn't the easiest time to be able to say that about a group of individuals being over there, to be able to say we brought everybody back home, and we were able to. One of my buddies, his truck got blown up by an IED, and big dude, love him to death, and he asked me to say his invocation for him at his retirement not too long ago, and but he's not one of those touchy-feely kind of guys. He's one of those, hey, you stay right there and talk to me. You don't need to be up in my space kind of guy. But anyway, his truck got blown up, and I was scared to death because we had no communication with them. All we knew was from a helicopter flying overhead that it relayed back that the convoy had been hit and that the truck that had been blown up was our wrecker. And so I knew he was in the wrecker. And so the next day, him and the guys come back into Balad, and man, I was so happy to see his big old face, and I ran up and started trying to give him a hug, and he wouldn't let me, and he ran. I finally cornered him and grabbed him and hugged him, and when I hugged him, I kissed him on the neck because I was so happy. Man, he spun on me, put me in a bear hug, and cracked a rib immediately. He squeezed me so hard. He heard it pop because he let me go. But I was just so happy that he was back home, that he had gotten back to base. But I learned a lot about myself on that deployment. Now, the reason Lisa probably doesn't think that was a good deployment. I came home scared all the time. For 9 months, everything I did, every minute of the day, I was armed and I was ready to defend myself and defend those around me. And then I came home, and you don't just walk around armed in the United States, you know. So I would wake up in the middle of the night trying to find my M4 rifle and couldn't find it. I would get mad because Lisa couldn't understand why I wanted to do things a certain way, or driving was weird because when we were over there, we owned the road. Wherever we went, if we didn't want you on the road, we either shot your tires out or shot your engine out or forced you off the road. So that was weird, coming back home and getting away from that. Thanks, babe. I got my concealed carry license and got a gun, and that Lisa couldn't understand that. It's like, why do we need a gun in the house? I mean, we have an infant, and why do we need this? And it was me being selfish. Again, I was not a very pleasant person. People that I worked with then, who I worked with later, when they heard that they were coming to work with me, they were nervous about coming to work with me because they remembered me back then. So I know it wasn't just at home, it was also at work and other places. But the most amazing thing that happened to us and to, I feel like, save our marriage was 10 months later, I went right back to Iraq and got right back over there. I wasn't supposed to go, but God had a plan, and God's plan was, you need to go back to Iraq. And so I went back to Iraq, and I was in Talil down south, and then I ended up in Mosul up north. And while I was in Mosul, it started snowing, which to me was weird because it's Iraq, right? Why is it snowing in Iraq? And so I called Lisa and talking to her, telling her about it snowing, and that's when I found out that her stepdad was, did I find out he had passed away, or did I find out that he was in the hospital?
Just in the hospital.
Yeah, in the hospital. So at that point, I was like, man, I need to come back home because this is an important man in Lisa's life, and I need to be there for her. So I didn't want to bother her too much, but I knew I could get a Red Cross message initiated, and I could be brought back home through the Red Cross. So I had to call my mom and ask her if she would help out with that. And I then told my mom, I was like, but I need to tell you where I'm at. Because I had told my mother I was going to Kuwait and that I wasn't going back to Iraq because I didn't want to worry him. So I had to explain to my mother that I was in Iraq. And not only was I in Iraq, I was in northern Iraq, and that I needed her to help figure out how to get me back home. So I came back home for that. And I had been told when I left, And it's weird, when I left the day that Saddam was home, and they didn't know if they were going to be able to get me on the plane because they weren't sure how the country was going to react to this. And so, by grace of God, I was able to get out and get back to the States and be here with Lisa and her family during that struggle. But I had been told, don't worry about coming back because we're almost done with our deployment, so just report back to Herbert Field and everything will be, you don't have to worry about coming back. So when I got close to my 2 weeks, I contacted Herbert Field because I was still up in Nashville, and they were like, no, go back. You need to finish. So I had to get on a plane in Nashville. After I'd already told all my family and everybody else, I'm home, I don't have to go back, I had to fly back. So again, I was upset and not a pleasant person. And then my grandfather on my dad's side of the family passed away after I got back, and they wouldn't let me come back home because I had just come back home. So at this point, I'm a very angry person. And so I went through what I consider my wrestling with God while I was in Iraq. They thought I know they thought I was weird. I wore a path. The place where we worked was a gravel compound. And at the end of the day, I also started smoking while I was over there. At the end of the day, I would grab a pack of cigarettes and I would just walk around that gravel and just argue with God. And just why, in 5 minutes, thank you. And why, and why am I so angry, and why do I do this, and why do I act this way, and just walk around. And I was talking out loud. I was just like, you know what, God, it's you and I have got to talk this out. We got to figure this out. What is it about me? What am I not doing right? And so the verse that sticks out in my head during that whole entire time is John 14:27. Let me see if I can make my phone do what it needs to do. So John 14:27 says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Do not let your heart be troubled, nor let it be afraid." And so I have the amplified version open on my phone. And so in parentheses, it says, "Let my perfect peace calm you in every circumstance and give you courage and strength for every challenge." So I made a change while I was in Iraq, that I was not going to be angry anymore. I was not going to be an unpleasant person, and I was going to be a better husband and a better father, and I was going to spend my days searching out and looking for the peace that I know God can give me. So when I came back home from that deployment, Lisa was expecting me to come back home the way I had come back in 2005. And I had told her on the phone, I was like, I'm coming back a different person. I'm coming back not the way that you remember me, and I'm going to be a better father and a better husband. And I think she believed me, but at the same time, there was also that doubt underneath of, oh, you know, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, we'll
When I
figure.
see it, I'll believe it.
There you go.
That's
Thank
Most
you.
certainly.
So I came back. Yeah, I mean, it's not that I don't get angry anymore. I mean, I still get fired up, but it's nothing like what it used to be. And I know that God sent me back to Iraq that second time for Lisa and Reuben. And I know that He that time that I took to argue and ask questions and just out loud, just why God, was huge for me, huge for my family. Um, yeah. So that was, and at that point in my career, I was reaching my 10-year mark, and I was trying to make the decision whether or not I was going to get out or stay in. But we'll talk about that. So that's the first 10 years of my career. And there's other things that I want to talk to you guys about over the next couple of Wednesdays about certain parts of those, because Lisa has amazing notes that even now I just smile, and like she wrote, in '98, he says, I'm not number one in his life. God is. He's getting closer and closer to him every day. I mean, things that we would talk about. And while I was trying back then, I wasn't searching for peace. I wasn't searching for God's peace. I found God's peace in Iraq in 2007, and that's huge, huge in my life and in Lisa's life, and I know in Ruben's life. We had always said that we were going to figure it out. We were going to make it work. We were never going to, call it quits on each other. And I'm just very thankful that God did what He did in my life and in our lives to get me to that point. It took a long time, but that also helped me realize that it's all in God's timing. It's all in God's timing, and it's not. I might want it right now, but it's all in God's timing. So with that, that's my first 10 years of my career. Anybody have any questions?
What rank were you?
Whenever I
Into your first tenure?
I was an E5.
Staff sergeant.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Staff sergeant. Sorry, Mitch.
I remember you being angry.
You do?
Oh, yes,
A lot.
very much. I mean, it wasn't something that was not noticed,
Yeah,
but
and
it was more toward Lisa that we noticed it.
yeah, I wasn't a very pleasant person.
Well, you were pleasant, but we knew you were angry.
Yeah,
We didn't know for sure why.
yeah.
Well, my memories of that period was, I don't remember when this was, but y'all had asked us to host the youth group. And you brought them all over to our house one evening, went outside to fix the hamburgers, and I was out of propane. We had to cook them in the oven.
Oh wow,
I remember that.
I don't remember that.
I do too, Lisa.
When you and I were out there and I realized I was out of propane, we both looked at each other like, it's 7:30 on Saturday night.
Wow.
I remember Micah and Lauren being in the youth group and them coming to several of the events and being upstairs when we had the youth group upstairs instead of back here.
Y'all were here when Mark and Angie were members here too.
Mhm.